Mahamsa Paribhajagacharya Krsna Bhaktivedanta Swami Prahupada ki jai. Ananda Gauri Vaishnava ki jai. Ramacharya Sri Haridas Thakur ki jai. Names of the whole Sri Krishna Sri Radha Krishna 𝒂𝒏𝒕 Sankand Radha वृंदावन धाम की जय, नवदीप धाम की जय, गंगा माया की जय, जमुना माया की जय, गुरु धाम की जय, स्वामी भक्तवृंद की जय, और ग्लोरी टू द और ग्लोरी टू द थैंक यू वेरी मच.
The following is a class on the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, 6th Chapter, text number 7, given by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prahupada, recorded on the 29th of November, 1976, in Vrindavan, India.
Translation. Actually, Lord Rishabhdeva had no material body, but due to Yoga Maya, he considered his body material, and therefore, because he played like an ordinary human being, he gave up the mentality of identifying with it. Following this principle, he began to wander all over the world. While traveling, he came to the province of Karnataka in South India and passed through Konka, Venka, and Kutaka. He had no plan to travel this way, but he arrived near Kutakachala and entered a forest there. He placed stones within his mouth and began to wander through the forest, naked and with his hair disheveled like a madman.
𝒕 एवं मुक्तलिङ्गस्य भगवतो
Rishabhas. Bhagavan in his any form is Mukta Linga. As we have got Linga Deha, Linga, this material body, and we have got our spiritual body. The spiritual body is covered by the material coating. This is not our actual body. But in the case of Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no such difference. Deha Dehi. As we have got difference, Dehi Nasmin Jatha Deha. Deha and Dehi. Dehi means the owner of the body. It's like I say, it is my body. I don't say, it is I body. Everyone has got this experience. Even a child asks him, pointing out to the finger, he'll say, it is my finger. Nobody says, I finger. Because there is difference between the body and the spirit soul. This is to be understood. Spiritual education means, beginning is to understand that I am not this body. Aham Brahmasmi. I am beyond this body. But in the case of Krishna or his different expansion, plenary expansion, there is no such difference. Deha Dehi. Prakita Koriya Mane Vishnu Kalebha Aparad Nahi Har Iharuko. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, any rascal, of course rascal he did not say, I say, but anyone who considers the body of Krishna is Prakita. Prakita means material. That is the greatest offense. The Mayavadi, they say so. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Mayavadi hoy Krishna aparadi. They think that when God is impersonal, but when he becomes a person, he accepts the material body. That is wrong. Here it is said that Muktalinga Sab Bhagavato Rishabhasya. There is no difference. Even a big scholar, while writing comments on Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says, Manmana bhavamadbhakta madhyajimang namaskuru, he warns the reader, it is not to the person, the soul or the spirit within the person. When he is thinking, Krishna is ordinary person. And he is a big scholar. This is going on. Krishna condemns, 𝒍𝒍𝒃 māgamūఢā manusam tanumāsa. Anyone who thinks that Krishna has a different soul, no. Krishna and Krishna's so-called soul, the same thing. There is no difference. That is the, otherwise how Krishna can lift as a 7-year-old boy Govardhan hill? Is it possible by this material body? No, this is not possible. This is common sense. But they cannot understand Krishna, mūఢā, 𝒍𝒍𝒃 māgamūఢā. They call it is mythology. Mythology. Everything mythology. First of all, they cannot find out what is God. And when God comes, so his opulences, this rascal says it is mythology. Now what God will do? He comes before you, he displays his mighty
opulences, he expanded himself into 16,000 forms. Mythology, what Krishna can do. Advaita achyuta anadi ananta rupam adyam purana purusham navajauvanancha. Shastra says, he has got ananta rupam, but is still on. There is no difference. They cannot understand the absolute truth and they like to comment upon it foolishly. Therefore, Sanatana Goswami says that don't hear anything from the Mayavadi, Avaishnava. Mayavadi means Avaishnava. Sanatana Goswami says that Savanam na kartavyam puta harikathamritam Savanam na kartavyam. Those are not Vaishnava. From them, do not hear transcendental topics. Avaishnava mukhad gina puta harikathamritam Savanam na kartavyam. Yes, word, don't hear. He is not a Vaishnava. Don't hear from him at least Gita, Bhagavatam or any Shastra. Don't hear, because they do not know what is actually the position. Krishna also says, Naham prakasa sarvasya yogamaya samam. Here it is said, yogamaya vasana. Atasya Krishna namadi nabhaved daiham indriyai. These blunt senses, they cannot appreciate what is Krishna. Yogamaya samamrita. He is covered. To the non-devotees, he is covered. To the devotees, sevanoke hi jivhadu, sayame he reveals. Yes, I am here, like this. So do not think Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has learned Prakita koriya mane Vishnu kaleva aparad nahi hiharupa. So long we are aparadhi, offender, there is no possibility of understanding Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore has warned that don't hear about Krishna or any transcendental subject matter from a Mayavad. Mayavadi bhasya sunile hoye sarvanash. If you hear from a Mayavadi, then your advancement in devotion and service is finished. Hoye sarvanash. You should be very, very careful. Avaishnava mukhadikina puta harikathamritam savanam na kartavyam. Sarpachishta payojatha. If one is not Vaishnava, don't be liberal. That, what is he? Wrong. He is talking Bhagavata, but he does not know. Who can speak Bhagavata? Here in Vrindavan there is a big Mayavadi sannyasi. He speaks on Bhagavata and speaks all nonsense. But there big crowd go to hear him. The Mayavadi has attracted, they are very educated, they can put things in jugglery of words. That capacity they have got. The people become amazed, almost everyone. So therefore they are not very much pleased with this movement that Krishna is God, we are preaching, and all full of Mayavadis. They are thinking what this nonsense will be. Krishna, they think Krishna is Maya. Vishnu kaleva Maya. Krishna says, Matta parataram nanya kinchi yasti dhananjaya avajanati magamura manusim tanuvas aham sarvasya prabhava matta sarvam pravartati. Repeatedly he is saying what he is, and he is personally present, and all the acharyas confirming Even Shankaracharya, he also says, Sa Bhagavan Sang Krishna, Narayana Paraham Bhaktya. Don't bring Narayana in this material world. So, Bhajagovindam, Bhajagovindam, Bhajagovindam Mudhaman. You rascal, you have studied so much grammar, now give up all this, Bhajagovindam, Govindam. Nahi nahi rakshati, duking karan. Your grammatical knowledge, dupratyaya, kingpratyaya, dingpratyaya, dingpratyaya. Oh, this is that. Bhajagovindam, Mudhaman. Prapte sanni hitakar, hitam, kulumaran. This jugglery of words will not save you. This is my final instruction. Mayavadam satchasram prachannam bhaudam uchyate. Kalu brahmana murtina. He has some business to do that. But actually, we should not hear about, especially Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, Sripad Shankaracharya avoided to write any comments on Srimad Bhagavatam. He has written comments on Bhagavad Gita, but he has completely avoided to write any comment on Bhagavatam, because he knew that I am doing the wrong thing. How can I touch Srimad Bhagavatam? Srimad Bhagavatam, Avaram Puranam, just Vaishnavaram Priyam, is purposefully avoided. And other acharyas like Sri Ramanujacharya, Madhyacharya, Vishnu Swami, and up to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, everyone has accepted Srimad Bhagavatam, Amalam Puranam. Amalam, there is no material contamination, pure description. Therefore, Vyasadeva, from the very beginning, he says that Dharma prodhita koitavo paramaninmasara. This book is not meant for the person who is envious. Envious, we begin enviousness from Krishna. Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam saranam bhaja. The envious person says, oh, this is too much. Why should I surrender to Krishna? I am also Krishna. I am also God. This is too much. This is rascal. The actual fact is that we are eternal servant of Krishna. We have forgotten it, and therefore we have become servant of Maya. We are suffering. And Krishna, out of his kindness, he comes to prove that the living entities are eternal servants, and he, this eternal master, is because they are contaminated by the Maya, Mahamaya. Mahamaya. Jadevi sarvabhuteshu nidra rupena sam. Mahamaya. This material energy is described in the Chandi. Jadevi sarvabhuteshu nidra rupena sam. Is keeping everyone in sleeping, more doses. Uttishtata jagrata praptavaran nibodhana. Therefore they say they don't sleep. Get up, rascal, get up. This is the opportunity. But no, Yogamaya Samabrita. Yogamaya is keeping him in sleeping condition. Nidralas. So, we should be very careful. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also, 𝒍𝒍𝒃, 𝒍𝒍𝒃. Gorachanda both. The Gorachanda's mission is to awake the conditioned soul. 𝒍𝒍𝒃, 𝒍𝒍𝒃. Gorachanda. Koto nidra jao maya pisachirapur. How long we shall sleep? We are thinking that I am sleeping at the lap of my beloved mother. Don't do this. Get up. The Vedic vachan, uttishtata, jagrata, prapta prajita. We should be very careful that we have got this body, human form of body. We should not sleep. Sleeping means ignorance. Mayandhaka. Just like at night we sleep because it is darkness. But during daytime we do not sleep, generally. So we must come to the light and may not sleep and lose the chance of human form of body. Here the instruction is the Krishna or 𝒍𝒑. 𝒍𝒑 is Bhagavata 𝒍𝒑. Imana jagatim avimana bhavasa. Vimana bhasa. He looks like ordinary human being, but you should be careful. No, he is not ordinary human being. Therefore we must know. These are the knowledge given by, and if we understand it perfectly, understanding means when we are uncontaminated, we can understand. So long we are contaminated, 𝒄𝒉𝒂𝒏𝒕 mama maya 𝒍𝒑, then you cannot. But you can get out of the clutches of this maya, then you can understand how 𝒑𝒚𝒔 𝒍𝒑 mayāme-tāṃ taranti. Just surrender. Surrender means to surrender Maya Saktamana Prartha Yoga Jinyan Madhasraya. This is surrender. Madhasraya. Take shelter of Krishna. Krishna we cannot take shelter directly. Madhasraya. But you can take shelter of a person who has taken shelter of Krishna. One is surcharged with electricity. If you touch him, then he will be also electrified. Evam parampara praptam evam. Krishna, 5,000 years ago, he spoke Bhagavad Gita. How we can hear him? Yes, we can hear him. By parampara system, Krishna says repeatedly that I am this, I am this. And Arjuna understands him, yes, you are this. Sarvame tamritam manne, jadvadusi kesava. Then he understands. He is directly understanding. And you take the version of Arjuna. Arjuna says, Parabrahma Paramudha. Why you rascal interpret in a different way, rascal? What right you have got? My Krishna is like that, my Krishna. What right you have got? Krishna says like this, one who listens to Krishna, about Krishna, he says like that. You rascal, why do you interpret in a different way? This is why. So be careful of these rascals. Mayavadi bhasya sunile hai sadhura. Then you will never be able to understand Krishna. Yoga Maya samabhrita. We should take the instruction of the Shastra that Krishna and Krishna's soul, there and there. 𝒍𝒑 is one without any second. Bhayam 𝒍𝒑 nishivata 𝒑 Isha upetas. So, the more we forget Krishna, then we are in the material stage. Material stage means bhayam, always fear. Oh, I shall accept Krishna as human being, as a person. It is not. How it can be a person? How a person can produce such a vast sky? He says, yes, I have produced this sky, but these rascals will not believe. How a person can do it? They will comment in their own way. So avoid this. Here, Rishabdev said about the personality of Godhead, accept them, believe them, take it. You understand and not understand, take it for granted. Then you will be able to make advance in Krishna consciousness. Thank you very much.
My first involvement is when I met Prabhupada. Yes, they're home.
And practical, and just paid my bait.
In front of me, and I look at Mayavadi. And Bhavananda fired the barber because he forgot to save me a sika. So anyway, Prabhupada didn't mind. He didn't say anything. And Prabhupada was quite pleased at that time. He saw in my face that I was trying to tell him the regulatory principles in English to please him. And he smiled and then he gave me the beads.
The installation of the deities was in Ram Nomi. And then the initiation ceremony took place on Balaram's Ras Purnima, April 21st, which was 5 or 6 days later. After the Hyderabad Pandal, we were headed from Hyderabad to the opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir. And a whole bogie was reserved for the devotees, so it was all just devotees in the train. And there was one Indian sadhu sitting on his suitcase by the bathroom. And he didn't really mix with any of the other devotees. Mostly they were just Western devotees, a few Indian devotees like Haridas. And I was really wondering whether he was part of our group or not. He was very quiet and very patiently sat on his suitcase by the bathroom the whole way to Vrindavan. And then during the festival, although there was a moratorium on sannyas, the devotees had gone to Srila Prabhupada and asked if Tripurari could take sannyas. And Prabhupada said yes. And they said when? And he said, well, he can take now. So along with Tripurari, one other devotee took sannyas, and his name was Gaur Govinda. And then when he was there, I saw that this is the same devotee that was sitting very quietly by the bathroom, coming from Hyderabad to Vrindavan.
I was serving at the Montreal Temple, Canada, and there was a lot of devotees going to India, and before we left, I went back home to Los Angeles where my parents lived to give them a visit. And as I was leaving there, my mother asked me, out of the blue, she said, is there something I can give to you to take to your spiritual master? And I was really taken aback by that question, and I went, oh, that's so nice. And I said, I don't know, what would you like to give him? And she said, I could make him some guava jam, because we had fruit trees at the property. So I told her that would be really nice. And so she made the guava jam, and she wrote on there for Srila Prabhupada. And when I was in Vrindavan, I went up to Srila Prabhupada's quarters and handed it through to one of his servants. And that was that. And then I found out for 2 days the Prabhupada's servant was looking for me. He had remembered what I looked like, but he didn't know my name. Finally, he found me, and he said that Srila Prabhupada really loved the gem, and he wanted my mother's name and address because Srila Prabhupada wanted to write her a thank you letter. There it was. I mean, all these devotees, huge event, the opening of the temple, the installation of the deities, and Srila Prabhupada was so concerned to write a thank you letter. So my parents received a letter from Srila Prabhupada, and he was thanking my mom so nicely for this guava jam. And he told her that it was his favorite jam and that his mother used to make guava jam for him. And then he went on to say that, do not worry about your daughter. I am taking care of her. She is nicely engaged in the Lord's service. It was just a really sweet letter. It's just so amazing that Srila Prabhupada took that time to recognize just that little gift from my mother in amongst so much activity going on and so many devotees.
Well, here Prabhupada is giving Bhagavad Gita class. He actually wanted Bhagavad Gita class to be held in the courtyard. And there was one Indian joined, his name was Prem Yogi, and he told him that he should give class in Hindi every evening. And there was also an Indian couple, Pranav and his wife, Vanamali, and he told him that he should also give Hindi class and his wife should sing bhajans. But then Pranav said, actually my wife is more intelligent than me, better that she gives the class. She speaks from Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada said, then that's all right, if she can do that, she can give the class. Now these people here, these are students from Nepal, and Prabhupada wanted them to chant the Purusha Sukta every day. And this is the Hindi teacher. Prabhupada wanted us to learn Hindi. One morning I tried to demonstrate my Hindi. So I said, Prabhupada, I'm learning from this teacher. And he said, so what have you learned? I said, Ek balak jata hai, which means one boy is walking. Then Prabhupada said, you know how to say in Hindi, 2 boys are walking? I said, no. And then he laughed. He said, you'll never learn Hindi. So I took that as an instruction.
This tree was a place of pilgrimage for Gaudiya Vaishnavas long before the Krishna Balaram Mandir was constructed in Vrindavan. In the early 1970s, there were purported to be very few Tamal trees in Vrindavan, one at Rasatali and one at the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami and Radha Damodar. So when Srila Prabhupada noted that the land had a Tamal tree on it, he was very, very pleased. There's an interesting pastime about this tree. Long before Srila Prabhupada sat under this tree, as we're witnessing in this footage, he envisioned himself sitting under this tree and looking at the deities of Krishna Balaram. He said, we'll have kirtan under this tree. And he said this tree should be worshipped. And the soil under the tree, a teaspoon of it should be taken and mixed with sand and water from the Yamuna River. And then with a coconut husk, you should clean the arti paraphernalia in our temple with this holy substance. This is a very sacred place for us. And let us pray that not only now, but in the future, Srila Prabhupada's wish will be fulfilled and Gaudiya Vaishnavas will be able to worship this sacred tree in this sacred location for many, many more years to come.
Jaya Jaya Ghena Matsadam
the next step, the next key component was the establishing of the Goshala. Krishna Balaram now needs to drink milk. Just like they did 5,000 years ago when they were herding Nanda Maharaj's 100,000 cows. So Prabhupada called me into his room and he says, I'd like you to establish a Goshala. Krishna Balaram need milk, and my disciples need to maintain health and vitality. Because in those days in Vrindavan, basically the milk that we were drinking was either watered down buffalo milk or very watered down, God knows what, milk. So that was important. So what do? Prabhupada has told me to start a Goshala. I didn't have any money. I didn't really know how to begin. So I had a Seiko watch on my wrist. And I thought, right, I'll sell my Seiko watch. And then H.D.G, one older Indian gentleman that Prabhupada regarded as his right-hand man in India. And H.D.G helped me incredibly over so many years in my service to Srila Prabhupada. So he took me to Govardhan market where there would be a monthly cow auction. And from the proceeds of selling my Seiko watch, I think we got about 800 or 900 rupees in those days for it, I was able to purchase 2 cows. And that's how the Goshala started. And the Goshala started simultaneously with the construction of the Gurukul, of the boys' Gurukul ashram, which also Prabhupada asked me to oversee the construction of that building.
After everyone had darshan, when the deities opened in the morning for Mangal Arati, then they went to the sort of respective altar, like the woman had Radha and Krishna, and the men had Krishna Balaram and Gonitai. And when Mangal Arati having darshan, and at some point I turned around and then there was Prabhupada, with 2 or 3 other devotees, it was him, one secretary or something. But all I know is that it was amazing to turn around and Prabhupada standing. You know how there are some steps. So he could not see very much, I suppose, being down from the steps and having the woman standing, turning our back to him, not knowing he was here, obviously. But I found out from Upendra afterwards that he was there for almost 10 minutes. Somebody was going to come to tell us to move. But when they tried to do that, Prabhupada said to just leave it. I mean, here's Prabhupada, probably not saying very much, and he just stood there with all our back to him. And had I not turned around and seen him, no one would have moved away. It touched me.
Prabhupada was invited to this convention of sadhus. So we all went. Of course, the whole thing was in Hindi. The first order of business, out of respect for Prabhupada, they voted Prabhupada to be the president of the convention. Of course, everyone had a chance to speak, but that also meant that the president would speak last. So Prabhupada had to sit. The Mona people, who don't speak, they use chalkboards to write. And the Jains with their mouths covered, and then all the Mayavadis and the yogis and Paramahansas, and everyone, they were talking, and Prabhupada, I don't know how he sat through all of this stuff. And then finally at the end, they asked Prabhupada to speak, and Prabhupada, he spoke in Hindi, but he was so animated, and he was quoting shlokas, and you could tell he was giving them the sauce. From the shlokas we could understand Bhagavatam kicks out cheating religion. They were all quiet, they couldn't say anything. Of course in the end then Prabhupada said, what is the use of these conventions? They talk about unity and peace, but they'll never achieve it. They all have their own idea. unless they surrender to Krishna, how can there be any unity?
After he spoke, Prabhupada said, let's go. And right away he sat down and he said, so did you understand what I was saying? And we said, a little bit, Prabhupada. He said, yes. I told him, everyone's speaking so many things, he said, but not once did anyone mention Krishna as a speaker of Bhagavad Gita, as being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He says that all your activities here will be useless. You won't accomplish anything. So he's still going on in the car. Prabhupada was a defender of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he just told them all off. And then he got in the car and he left. And I remember on the way back, we headed back to Delhi, I guess, and there was a big typhoon. And it was pouring rain, and trees were blowing down in front of us and behind us. It was just like all hell broke loose, after Prabhupada left this assembly.
Towards the end of the darshan at Delhi temple, he sat next to his harmonium and played a few melodies of the Hare Krishna mantra, Enchanted. And then he pushed the harmonium away and he said, this is the way to please Krishna, to chant the Hare Krishna mantra in different melodies. And during Srimad Bhagavatam class, in that lecture he was talking about hogs, dogs, camels and asses. And my parents came to that particular lecture. And my father's response after that was, he said, what kind of lecture was that? He was just talking about hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. And Prabhupada gave us just what we needed to hear, but we're not always willing to accept. But it was very interesting. He was talking about 𝒉𝐻𝐈𝐍 life and hogs, dogs, camels, and asses. No Radhe Radhe or intimate pastimes or anything like that. When you look back now, it's so much clearer, how his preaching was medicinal on the level that we needed to hear these things, and we still need to hear these things. He's giving the right medicine, the right dose at the right time. Not like a quack who give you something that you like to take, but doesn't actually do the job.
Devotees. But you can see Prabhupada, after arriving 10 hours on the plane, 12 hours, sometimes 15-hour flight, he's always fresh and spry. Navayovana, Krishna's Navayovana. So Prabhupada was the servant of the ever-fresh Krishna, so he was always spry himself too. And Prabhupada's weighted down with the flowers. There's never too many flowers. Prabhupada would distribute the flowers. And there he is, from material calculation, an old man walking with the young, spry, enthusiastic devotees. This was a great scene. Prabhupada felt comfortable in the presence of all the young, enthusiastic devotees. He didn't feel out of place. Srila Prabhupada would only come to Australia once a year, which was quite good considering the remoteness of the country. But Prabhupada came to Australia 6 different times. This is a good picture. On the right is the temple, and on the left is the Prabhupada house. Beautiful yellow and white. We painted the whole house. Up on the top it said Prabhupada House. There's a widow's walk on the top where they could look out into the ocean. Here's Prabhupada walking in. This old house was about 100 years old, a Victorian house, a historical house. It was the first house in the whole neighborhood that was built by this rich man. All the details about it you can get from Korma's book, The Great Transcendental Adventure, by Korma Das, the cook. The whole house was redone, and We made it very elaborate, ebony wood, and the drapes in the walls, and the floors were all done over, and the chandelier, and Prabhupada walked in, he looked around, he says, all this is for me. And we said, yes, Prabhupada, this is Prabhupada's house, your house. So we were very happy. But before this time, we had always been operating out of small houses and storefronts, and the devotees collecting in the streets and enduring a lot of different hardships, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. So moving into this new temple and inviting people was the crowning glory of all their efforts, and it was a time of great pride for the devotees to showcase their spiritual master in such a beautiful setting and such a relaxed atmosphere. And this marked a great historic time in Australia Yatra.
When Prabhupada came back and they took him up to his room, and so I went up there and brought this beautiful silver bowl with these peanuts and spiced rice bubbles in it. And I came in and put it down before Prabhupada and paid my obeisances. And then Prabhupada took out his Gayatri thread and started chanting his Gayatri. So all the other big Brahmins in the room brought out their Gayatri threads and sat there like this. And then after a very short time, Prabhupada finished chanting his Gayatri. Everyone else still had their, sacred thread hooked around their thumbs. So Prabhupada reached into this bowl of these spiced rice bubbles, picked up a little bit and handed to the nearest Brahmin. He still had his thumb hooked around this Gayatri thread. And what a dilemma. So all the devotees immediately stopped chanting their Gayatri, put their hands out and accepted what Prabhupada was offering them. I've later found out from 𝒍𝒘𝒂𝒏𝒕's book, this was a fairly common occurrence, that Prabhupada chanted his Gayatri very quickly. So one by one, the devotees got up and left the room, and I was still sitting there alone with Prabhupada. And he asked me what my service is. I said, Prabhupada, I do cooking and deity worship. He said, oh, that is very nice.
This is one of the things I think the devotees really appreciate, and I talk about it a lot, is, it's seeing how we're hearing how Prabhupada lived. That, we all need to see and know how Prabhupada practiced Krishna consciousness. And taking prasadam to me, was just such a wonderful activity, the way he did it. You can see he always took prasadam alone, 99% of the time. And if there was someone who was in the room, when I would bring him prasadam, he would just very graciously, he would take off a piece of fruit or 2 or 3 for whoever was there, or a little sweet, and just give them a little something and say, okay, Hare Krishna, and send them on their way. And then he would sit there and he would just honor prasadam. He did it very calmly and peacefully, and never in a rushed way, never talking about different things, but he relished prasadam. It was such a nice thing to see. There's another thing we do, especially as Westerners, we can turn taking prasadam into meeting times and just socializing times with other devotees, just carelessly, talking about whatever, and really not get into the significance of honoring prasadam, mercy from Krishna. You could see with Prabhupada, he took it in that way. You could just feel, he was honoring Krishna in the form of his prasadam. So wherever he was, prasadam he was ready to have right around noontime. And as he traveled and the time changes, he would just immediately adapt. There was no adjustment periods for Prabhupada. Never talked about jet lag, having to recover, take a day off. Just went right in and immediately accepted his responsibilities that he had, given himself, giving class, greeting the deities, morning walk, meeting with the devotees, the management, giving advice.
The first time I met Srila Prabhupada, I met him in Burnett Street. Upendra asked me up to go and see him, and I sat down after offering my obeisances, and Srila Prabhupada looked straight at me and said, "So you've had doubts?" And I hadn't said a word, so it was obvious straight away that I was in the presence of someone quite extraordinary, because I did have doubts and I hadn't expressed them. And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, I really like to chant, but I have a lot of trouble with the Hindu mythology, with people with 4 heads flying around on swans," was exactly what I said. And he sat back and put his hand back behind his head, played with his seeker, and sort of looked up. And then he looked back at me and he said, "So don't worry about that, just chant, and everything will be fine." So that was the first instruction he ever gave me. I took that very seriously, and I started chanting like 32 rounds a day. I took it on board as best I could. And then from that point, the next time I saw him was in Sydney. Someone had told him I was an artist. And he said, "So you're an artist?" And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, I'm a painter." And he said, "Could you design a temple?" I was young, so I said yes. So he got me to come around his desk and sit right next to him. And so I sat down next to him, and everyone was askance, you know, they were sort of all quite taken back. And so was I was trembling. I remember everything was trembling. And he took out all these small black and white photographs of Vrindavan, and particularly the temple where he lived, the Radha Damodar temple, and showed me the photographs. And he asked me to design a temple for Vrindavan. And he gave me this whole, you know, there must have been 50 photographs. So what happened is I went away and designed a temple, but I didn't stick to the Radha Damodar format that he gave me, and I designed something far too modern. And in the end I produced a huge architectural model and everything, with none of which I'd ever done before. So it was really quite wonderful, because I was only 22. But he was very kind through the whole process and very supportive. And he did mention that when you do something with the mood of service, it's not necessary that it be carried out for the service to reach fruition, because the actual engagement in that mood was the thing that mattered. So he was very encouraging. The only reason I wanted to share all that is that I had a lot to do with the design of Burnett Street, and I had a bit to do with this as well, the current Melbourne temple. During that time there was a lot of petty divisions within the movement, and people were very concerned about whether you lived in or out of the temple and all of that sort of thing. And it was all very understandable, because people were very young, trying to find their feet in something that was way beyond their understanding. At that stage I had reasonably long hair, and I'll never forget this, because I did a painting which is now in Srila Prabhupada's room in the Melbourne